Our guest in this segment is Mike Pollock, who is the founder of Spectrum Gaming Group, which is a consultancy that has grown as the gaming industry has grown and has diversified as the gaming industry has diversified. Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about that evolution of Spectrum and where you are today and where you'd like to be in the next few years.
Thanks, Frank. I want to correct you on one point. I'm a co-founder because my partner, Fred Gushin, has actually been doing this longer than I have. He's older than me. So we've been at this for quite some time.
I noticed you point out he's older than you.
I like to point that out. And we've obviously grown as the casino industry has expanded both domestically in the US and around the world. And we're still continuing to grow because one of the principles that we live by and work by is that we need to identify the trends as to where this industry is going and to get there ahead. So that when the industry gets there, they're going to see us waiting for them with our flag planted saying, this is where we as an industry need to go, and these are the issues that we as an industry need to consider.
So where is the industry going and what are some of those issues?
This industry is at you don't need me to tell you this, but this is clearly at a critical juncture in the future of this industry, particularly in the US, but it's a global industry, so it affects everybody. We recognize that, as everyone else did, that you didn't have to be Nostradamus to predict that the Supreme Court was going to strike down PASPA. We knew that was coming. We knew either through the courts or congressional action that it was coming. So consequently, what you're left with is an industry, and I'm using the industry in its widest term, because this is a heavily regulated industry. Regulators and legislators are part and parcel of the industry. The decisions they make or choose not to make affect everyone. And as you know, we're the executive director of the National Council of Legislators from Gaming States, where we advise them on best practices. In this new era with sports betting and iGaming and a lot of other emerging forms of gaming on the horizon, the role of legislators and regulators is more critical than ever. So essentially what we're advising them is to move deliberately but carefully. A lot of states, a lot of operators, a lot of jurisdictions want to be first to market, early to market. And I can understand that rationale, and that's fine. But we're also cautioning it's better to get it right than to be first. They want to be in time for this football season. Well, last I heard, there's probably another football season after that. So that's one of our pieces of advice.
You've created a sports betting division group within Spectrum, and things are happening very, very fast. Can you just update us a little bit from your perspective?
Sure. Well, we formed the Spectrum Gaming Sports Group as a unit, a very highly focused unit within our team to deal with a variety of issues that are already arising and will continue to arise. And one of the key people, because there is not a lot of sports betting experience in the US, we're working with Lee Richardson from the UK, who's arguably the premier sports betting expert in the world. We work with him on the Totally Gaming Academies, sportsbook training classes, and he's top notch. So what we're already dealing with, and we're still in the early stages. We've advised the Rhode Island Lottery, helped them write an RFP. We're working presently with the District of Columbia Lottery in terms of their consideration of getting sportsbook up and running. We're working with major sports leagues, Major League Baseball, National Basketball Association, and advising them, and both tribes and commercial operators. The issues are different, but there's a common theme running through them, and that is, what really does sports betting mean for each market and for each operator? Not surprisingly, and you've been around a long time, you know that whether it's...
Is that a reference to my age also?
No, it's experience. You know that, particularly from legislators and regulators, when they look at an issue like sports betting or iGaming or pick a form of gaming, They multiply the tax rate by what's expected, and they figure that's what we're going to build into our fiscal model. Our advice is significantly different, and our advice is take a wide look at precisely where all of the areas that, whether it's sports betting or iGaming, are going to touch. And when you take that wider perspective, you get an entirely different picture, and you get an entirely different fiscal outlook and an entirely different policy outlook. I mean, for example, you're in Delaware, and you see this firsthand. I'm in New Jersey. We see it firsthand also, is that new forms of gaming, one of the key benefits is that it's going to attract a younger demographic, a different demographic. And they're not simply going to come in to wager on sports, or they're not simply going to use their iPhones to make bets on whatever form of iGaming is available in that market. They're going to earn points in loyalty programs. They're going to be marketed to, presumably very effectively. And they're going to come into brick and mortar facilities and spend money in multiple cash registers, gaming and non-gaming. We're seeing that. That's a fact. It's not a theory any longer. We've got the evidence to support that. So consequently, as a result, the benefits are much greater than you would anticipate by simply looking at it through the narrow lens of that particular form of gaming. You get different answers when you look at it through a broader lens.
Not very many years ago, if we talked about gaming, it was pretty simple. We talked about slot machines and table games. Today we have interactive gaming in various sorts. We have casual gaming. We have companies like Aristocrat acquiring Plarium, which is an entirely different kind of game experience. We have in the nascent stages of virtual reality. We have this phenomenon called esports. From your perspective, tell us a little bit about those emerging forms of gaming.
Well, it's funny that you should mention that, because one of the areas that this industry needs to focus on is recognizing that the slot floor, as presently constituted anywhere in the U.S., because they're pretty similar, let's face it, its future is limited. I can't tell you what year it's going to be essentially disappearing, but it's on its way out. That business model cannot sustain itself for long. So you mentioned things like esports and skill-based gaming and a lot of other things that artificial, AI and so forth, virtual reality. There are ways to capture that. The thing we've also formed, again, because one of our jobs, one of our missions is to anticipate what's going to happen. We also formed Spectrum Esports Advisors in partnership with our good friend Alex Eigelman and Millennial Esports. Esports we're right at the very early stages of what this can accomplish. So the question is, what can it accomplish? What I like about esports is that the potential is enormous. You can have esports as essentially as an amenity, similar to the way boxing exists in gaming, as something to draw people into the facility. You can have it on sort of a poker like head-to-head player where the house takes a rake. You can have it as a pari-mutuel activity. There's all sorts of things that it can evolve into. We don't know precisely how it's going to evolve. We're at the very early stages. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to get it to that point. One of the things I like most about esports is when you and I, and presumably anybody, thinks about esports, what comes to mind is a very young demographic. A very young demographic. I went to the Barclays Center recently. We had a big esports event. Thousands of people lined up to get in. The average age of the player, I mean, it had to be like 14. That's not the future. And I say that for a couple of reasons. Even if you deal with 18, 21-year-olds, first of all, they don't have disposable income. Second of all, if you plan for what they're interested in now, I don't know about you, but I think probably the same for you as for me and for a lot of other people. What I did at 40 is a lot different. My interests at 40 were when I had disposable income, were a lot different than they were at 21. So it's hard to plan that thing. But what's really interesting about esports is that you can target esports like a rifle for particular demographic groups. I mean, you can target it so that you're not going after the 18-year-old, the 21-year-old, the 25-year-old. You can target it for females over 50, and you can narrow the appeal depending on the game. That's one of the things that's interesting. That is going to be the future. Will it replace the slot floor? To a certain degree, yeah, it will.
Okay, very thought-provoking. That's one of the reasons we like to have you here each year. A final question, Mike, using your crystal ball again. If you were to look at the gaming industry 3 or 5 years from now, what's it going to look like?
3 to 5 years, it'll look pretty much like it does now. What you're going to see is, that's always the phrase. I don't know why 3 to 5 is magical. Someone said to me yesterday, when someone said 3 to 5 years, it means they don't have a clue. So I don't know why 3 to 5 is particularly magical sort of period. But you're going to, obviously, we predict that probably 9 states are going to adopt some form of sports betting within the next year. Looking at it, it's going to be more beyond that. What we're going to see, I don't know if it's 3 to 5 years, but at some point in the foreseeable future, is that there's going to be some opportunities, there's also going to be some problems. One of the things we're seeing is that lotteries, which are a huge industry in and of itself, and casino gaming, both tribal and commercial, have always operated in their individual silos. That's changing. Lotteries, as a consumer-facing industry, are not going to be content with selling tickets at 7-Eleven forever. They're moving into iGaming, and they're moving into sports betting. And how is that going to be resolved? It's not easy. It has to be resolved, but it will not be easy. Also, again, this gets back into, as you well know, a lot of the compacts that states have negotiated with tribes in their respective jurisdictions, a lot of them were built on principles of geographic exclusivity. That's generally the abiding quid pro quo that states offer. Not the only one, but generally that's the most common. What does geographic exclusivity mean in an online world? The answer to that is self-evident. How is that going to be resolved? You've got states like Connecticut where they never asked us, I'll tell you this, but they made an enormous mistake years ago when they negotiated a evergreen compact that taxes 25% of slot revenue, 0 on tables, presumably under the assumption that tables were the past, slots were the future. I don't buy that, you don't buy that. There's a lot of issues that have to be resolved over the next 3 to 5 years. And a lot of these are in the political realm. We don't know. But one of the things that's also important from the gaming industry standpoint, the good news is that gaming is not, is generally favored. There's no blue or red gaming. Democrats and Republicans generally both like gaming. The bad news is Democrats and Republicans generally like gaming. By that I mean that they don't see it as, they see it as free money. They don't see how tax revenue on gaming really does have a cost. So again, that's a huge issue that has to be resolved.
Well, it sounds to me, Mike, like Spectrum's going to be a very busy organization in the next few years.
Next 3 to 5, yes.
3 to 5. Mike,
Thanks,
thank you
Frank.
as always.
Thank you.